Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Hara. I'm your host of Social Impact Live, a weekly conversation with members of the Columbia School of Social Work community. I am very pleased to welcome to the program today 3 guests. We've had a number of programs this semester with multiple guests, and they're always so much fun to do. And I can't think of a funner group to do this with than the guests that we have today. So first, there's Ericka Echavarria, who's an associate director of the Field Education Department at CSSW and also an adjunct professor. We have Jaime Estades, who is also an adjunct lecturer and professor, I believe, and at the School of Social Work, and founder and executive director of the Latino Leadership Institute, in addition to a host of other activities, which I hope he'll be telling us more about very soon. And finally, we've got Ovita Williams, who is also an associate director of field education still, correct, Ovita?
Yes, correct.
But also executive director of the CSSW Action Lab for Social Justice. So Ericka, Jaime, Ovita, welcome to Social Impact Live.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
Nice to be here.
And
Nice to be here.
Yeah, no, and thank you so much for coming on today to talk about this project that you've got. I thought the name of the course was 5 sessions, but apparently that's the name of the play that Jaime wrote, on which this course is based. And you're using this play to sort of develop a whole new way of teaching about privilege, race, oppression, and power in social work practice. So this sounds really exciting, and I've had Jaime and Ovita on the program before, and I'll have you maybe introduce yourselves briefly a little bit later on. But Ericka, since you're new to the program, I was wondering if you could just give a little bit of a self-introduction. One of the things that you have in common with everybody here is that you a connection with law, right? You've got a law degree, and then you went into social work. How did that happen?
So, thank you, Richard. I always wanted to be an advocate. I'm a child of immigrants, and as a child found myself advocating a lot for my parents and helping them navigate a lot of the systems here. And the natural inclination and also their persuasion was to go to law school and learn how to be an advocate. And while I was a student in law school, I did not find that I was getting opportunities to have conversations around things like power, race, oppression, and privilege. And this was a long time ago. This was back in 2000, around that time. And I always had many questions. I felt that I needed to, in order to advocate for my clients, I wanted to know more about them. I wanted to know how they got there, and I wanted to know about the systems in which they found themselves in. And that wasn't necessarily, those were not necessarily conversations that I was having in law school. And then when I decided to pursue my MSW, that's when everything started clicking, and that's when I found myself just doing group projects and talking to professors and just writing papers about everything that I wanted to know about, which is a major topic of this course that we're developing. So and the two go hand in hand, right? The law informs social work, but social work practice also informs the advocacy that many lawyers do. And we, I think, are very fortunate that we are trained. Our training has a built-in self-awareness practice that lawyers could really use in their practice. And part of this class is really tapping into that self-awareness and building that self-awareness to inform social work practice and a more justice-based social work practice.
Now, we were talking about this the other day, but you were the one who saw Jaime's play and got the idea that maybe this is something that could be worked into a course. Were you the kind of the spark that got this project going?
Well, actually, it's all Jaime, but Jaime and
Okay.
I was able to see a reading of Jaime's
Hmm.
play, and Jaime and I taught the first rollout of the prop advocacy class, and that's where we met. And we just hit it off, had great chemistry, and continued these conversations outside of the classroom. And he told me about his play. He said, "Yeah, you got to check it out. I'm going to do a reading of this play for my class just to engage them in a different way." And then I saw it and it was amazing. And then that's when we talked about, hey, this could really be a class. And maybe there are other ways we could use this play to engage students, to engage field instructors. And actually, that's what we ended up doing first. As an associate director in field education, I also coordinate the seminar and field instruction course. So we train all our field instructors. And I thought, hey, we both thought this would be a great class to bring into our orientation of that course and really expose our field instructors to the play and to the conversations through the play. And it was great. This feels like we did it years ago, before Zoom, right? It was live. We actually were able to show it in a room full of people. They watched a series of clips, and we asked questions, and they loved it. I mean, there was so much dialogue in the room about the play, and it brought up so many discussions around what are some of the issues that come up when you're supervising a student. So, I mean, Jaime could tell you more really about his idea to bring it into the classroom with our students, but that's part of the story, a little piece of it.
Okay, thanks for providing the prologue. We have a clip, and I'm going to show that. Well, is it queued up and ready to go? Maybe since we've been talking about the play, maybe just seeing a little bit of a clip now would be helpful. So.
Well, the purpose of this session is for you and I to form a connection. So the conversation can develop in any way you want it to. Since these sessions are about you, not me, the conversation can develop in any way you want it to.
Okay, so tell me about yourself.
Again, this is about you, not me.
You just told me that the conversation can develop any way I want to. Well, I want to know about you.
Yes, I said that, but if it were about me, you wouldn't benefit from these sessions.
Then why do you just say so from the beginning instead of remaining quiet? You've already wasted time talking about you and your rules instead of me. Does this make any sense?
Well, I was just trying
You could have just said, please start by telling me something about yourself.
Okay, that's fair. Tell me your thoughts about being here.
You're a Columbia girl, aren't you?
Pardon me?
You went to Columbia University.
How do you know I studied at Columbia?
Columbia, you put the diploma right behind your head like a crown, so as poor, pitiful people will know how much smarter than us you are.
What?
All right. Yeah, wonderful clip there. And I should bring in Jaime now. But before I do, I just want to remind our audience that even though we do reserve the last 10 minutes for Q&A, if you've got a question, put it into the chat box. We'd love to field them earlier rather than later in the program, just to make sure that we can get it in. All right. So, all right, Jaime, the big question. Yeah, and I know you've got a law degree as well. You're a social worker. How did you write this play? I know you've got a little bit of background. You're a producer for a documentary film, I think, in the past as well. So how did you come to write this play?
Well, this play, I wrote it like 5 years ago, and it was basically my frustration that I had for many years. I'm going to be very honest with the social work profession. I was first a social worker, is the opposite of Ericka. First a social worker, And I thought that in order for me to be a better advocate, I needed to learn the law because I basically work in the community organizing in terms of groups, advocacy, etc. But every time I tried to do a project with community leaders, when I was organizing tenants, etc., I needed to know more about the law in order to advocate properly. And like Ericka said, everything is part of the other. If there is a profession in academia that can merge into everything else very easily, is social work, because we deal not only from the individual aspects, but also in the social aspects. So in order to be a more complete social worker, I thought that I needed to learn more about the law, because many of the issues that my clients and the groups that I was working that they were struggling with had to do with issues of power and policies that were oppressing them. And unfortunately, organizing is good, but the law and organizing together basically make your advocacy more powerful, which is the opposite of how Ericka got into social work. I got into the law in the same route, but with a different result. So
And
yes, go ahead. But basically, I had a frustration. Also, I was a director of social services. I work as a drug counselor, alcoholism counselor. So I did a lot of one-to-one. My BA's in psychology. So I always found that the practice of social work was incomplete, and I had a lot of criticism of it in terms of how social work, especially the clinical social work, the clients that I used to have, ignore the fact that there are policies that create trauma. It's not only the individual on his own and family issues, etc. Society, to me, is the main creator of trauma. And the School of Social Work was keeping that completely ignored and aside. And I taught at Fordham, Rutgers, Columbia, NYU, and I thought that there was incomplete and that we were not empowering our clients because we were concentrating only on the psychology. The gist of the play is one sentence that Ovita and Ericka are tired of listening from me, which is, do you think that slaves in the South would have felt better about slavery if they had therapy 3 times a week? So, of course not. The issue is slavery, it's a policy. So it doesn't matter how much therapy you provide, the trauma is going to be there because you are not dealing with the cause of the trauma. And most of the trauma in a capitalist society like this one, a racist society like this one, it comes from power, it comes from institutions, it comes from policy. And social work, in my opinion, has been an ally, maybe unconsciously, of those oppressions, and is not dealing exactly with the trauma that poor and people of color have to deal every day. So therefore, this is a criticism in order to create a new type of approach, a new type of psychology, combining the macro and the micro together. Is a challenge that I'm presenting. And basically, that's the purpose of the play.
Yeah, what I find so fascinating about it, and there's a comment from the audience, we need more arts in the practice of clinical social work. It's all narratives, stories, secrets, and journeys. But what I find when we talk about narrative and stories is that often it's from an individual perspective, right? It's plot, right? And subjective experience. And what I find fascinating about this play is that you sort of taking storytelling and based it in terms of dialogue, right? It's a conversation. It's the interaction between people and how they mutually shape and affect one another that I think is just such a different way for us to think about the arts and the art of practice in social work. And I was just wondering, Ovita, I mean, sort of with this, how do you sort of take this and sort of use it in terms of your work, sort of teaching students social work practice? I know that you're a co-author of a revised textbook on field education and so on. So what did you see in this play that excited you in terms of social work pedagogy and teaching practice?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was able to see the full play on stage a few years back. Jaime had it at a theater down in the Lower East Side. And I was just transfixed, you know, we just saw a clip. And even from that clip, you see how rich the information is, the details, the exchange between two people. You can talk probably for a couple of hours with just the clip that you saw today. So when I spoke with Jaime, and I think at the time Dr. Marian Rydell and I and Ericka and a few people were like, you know, this is a different way of learning than the way that we show up in our very westernized classrooms, which is you read a paper, you write a paper, you listen to a lecture, you get a grade, right? And, you know, that's just how our educational system is set up for a very Eurocentric lens of teaching and learning. So for us, it was pretty natural, actually, to think about learning in a way that uses all of our senses, so to speak, that allows for students to visualize, to be contemplative in their practice, mindful, to use what they're seeing and have discussions around it. Part of the course is also reenacting a scene, right? Okay. So that's a really powerful way as well to, in the moment, be able to, what might you do differently? And to really reenact that in the classroom, receiving feedback from your colleagues in the classroom. The idea for the course is an extension from the first year decolonizing social work course, which is the original Power, Race, Oppression, Privilege course that was developed 5 years ago by students and faculty and alum. So this seemed like a natural extension of that in second year for students to be able to now extend what they were able to grasp in the decolonizing social work course into this way of using this incredible piece of art from Jaime that they can really practice, critically analyze, share with each other, and position different ways of thinking about the way that they've learned practice, social work practice. And I think that's what makes it so rich.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm thinking, well, okay, we're not asking students to necessarily write papers on this and so on. I mean, there's so many different ways that they can kind of engage and connect with this material the same way that you and Ericka also kind of connected with it when you first saw the play. What do you imagine the impact is going to be on students when they see this play? And I'll go back to Ericka since I haven't had a chance to bring you back into the conversation. How do you think they'll react to this? I mean, it really is a departure from our traditional evidence-based approach, right? To teaching and thinking about social work practice. So what do you think, the response is going to be?
I think they're going to love it. I think the class is going to be, it's geared towards students, second year students, will likely be an elective. So you have to want to have interest in furthering developing awareness and capacity to have critical conversations around power, race, suppression, and privilege. So I think that will help keep students engaged in the course. But I also, I think that this is really turning the classroom upside down, right? Like what Ovita was saying about decolonizing the space is really inviting students to bring in their own wisdom as they will have an opportunity to watch a clip. They'll have opportunities to reflect on it through a mindful practice. And then by re-envisioning how they think this interaction should go between the client and the therapist, or maybe the therapist and her supervisor, through their own positionality, right? Through their own identity. It brings in a different type of learning, a collaborative way of learning that I think is necessary for students to feel empowered, but also to actually leave with the skills that they need to practice in post graduation. So I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be challenging. I think it'll be controversial. Definitely there will be discomfort in the room, but that's all part of the learning process, right? And I think ultimately the impact is that they will feel more ready and have more capacity to do the work through a power, race, suppression, and privilege lens.
Yeah, and one thing that comes to my mind is that, if students view this, what's powerful about it is not only being able to identify with the novice therapist in the play, but also with the main character, right? The super, as he's called, and really getting into not just into his mind and experience in a way that, we can't do in these sort of 5-minute little role plays in our practice courses that really don't allow you to sort of see that whole arc of development over time in this relationship between the social worker and the super. So yeah, thank you so much, Ericka. I want to go back to Jaime and just again sort of ask you, did you write this play, thinking that this was going to teach people something about power and privilege and oppression and social work practice, or what I'm getting at is, or were you pursuing a different kind of truth, maybe an artistic and aesthetic truth here in this play? And is there a difference?
Well, everything merged at the beginning. I mean, at the end. At the beginning, it was, to be honest, it came out of anger, it came out of my frustration with the profession. It came out of my frustration with the way, for example, I chose Colombia before I came to teach at Colombia. See, the therapist is called Colombia by the therapist, by the client, mocking her throughout the whole play, calling her Colombia. And I wrote all that before I came to teach at Colombia. So it's a coincidence that I'm here with the play. And the thing is that Colombia at that point, and graduates from Colombia, but it could be from any school of social work, especially that were Anglo-Saxon, that they were middle class, had no idea of how to deal with people like me. And had no idea how to deal with my community and the Black community, Latino community, the Asian. It was just one model, that it was a bourgeoisie white model of psychology that basically was being used to treat the whole, and it was leaving 3/4 of the whole out, because it didn't include in that therapy the macro aspects, the social aspects. That's why the sentence at the beginning is important. You can do as many sessions of therapy as you want, but if you don't eliminate and you don't enter as a social worker, see, we're not psycho workers in the sense of psychology. We're social workers.
Mhm.
Psychology takes care of that. We need to merge the macro and the micro in order to serve communities of color and poor communities more effectively. Now, it had to do with people like Ovita, Ericka, and me, that we have been talking about this. You know, I met Ovita 20 years ago. I met Ericka 25 years, you know, because when I met them, I knew what they were thinking and they knew what I was thinking, because all of us have been critical of how social work has been, but we have never been heard. There is a prop program at Columbia, and and I wasn't there when it was done, but I know why it's there. You know why? Because people spoke loudly. That's why it's there. So now what we're doing through the play is to speak loudly. It's like, look at me, listen to me. Please listen to me. That's what the play is saying. You got it wrong. You got some things right, but you got other things wrong. And you cannot expect our clients to surpass the trauma if we don't deal with the policies and the organizing that is needed in those communities and the change of the whole society. We need to be transformative. Also, I discovered that organizing is more healing sometimes than the psychotherapy itself. And I have seen it in practice. 20, 25 people feeling a lot better after they have a victory against the landlord or against a policy. You don't know how their psychic, their well-being changed completely, because they are empowering themselves. The social work that we practice now, it doesn't empower people. It's not an individualized one. So I'm sorry.
I just want to add to what Jaime is saying, that this is liberation. This is liberation. This is what we need to get to, is that, you know, it's not just a microclinical work. It's the act of liberation. And that involves, we have to always include, as Jaime is saying, all of the systems that people are impacted with. If we decolonize, abolish, those systems are what's creating people's anguish, if you will. Right. And I just want to add that the most of our students are clinical students, and each of us, all three of us, and many colleagues constantly share with students that the work is not just individual. It's much bigger, right? So even in that clinical method practice area, if you're just treating the individual, you're not looking at the entire picture. And I think that's what's so great about this particular play that Jaime has produced.
Absolutely. I just wanted to note that we started a little bit late today, so we're going to run over a few minutes, maybe an extra 5 minutes here, just to try to get in some of these comments and questions that our audience has submitted to us. There was here a question: since constitutional law and case law has largely been engineered and weaponized by white people, can it ever be in the same movement with radical freedom and change? I mean, you've also, Ovita, I just wanted to check with you, because I know that you worked for the...
I'm not a lawyer.
You're not only, but you work for the district attorney's office.
Yes, I work for the prosecutor's office for a few years, yes.
Yeah. So how do we reconcile these things? You know, the sort of macro issues with the fact that, you know, direct practice often sort of means, you know, sort of working within the system, right, to affect the kind of larger change that we want to see.
Well, this is what we need to do. We need to do things like this. There are other ideas out there. But in terms of the constitutional issue, you know, there is nothing that has been more oppressive to this day and more anti-democratic. And this is where I don't get in trouble. People think that I'm getting in trouble. I'm not getting in trouble. There is nothing more anti-democratic than the Constitution of the United States. The electoral colleges is the first example of that. The 3/5 of a man. The concept of a 3/5 of a man, what it did, it was that created the first affirmative action program for whites. That is the Constitution of the United States, by excluding a whole group of people from the Constitution.
But
Only 100,000 people could vote out of 3 million when the Constitution was created. And now we're experiencing how people more conservative are exploring the Constitution itself to justify the positions that they have in order to bring back Jim Crow laws that basically affect voting. So if you want to go to the genesis of the trauma of this country, you start with the Constitution of the United States.
Ericka, you wanted to say something, I think?
yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely in the space, right? That conversation. But I also want to, I think it's important as a helping professional. So we could be talking about social workers, lawyers, but even doctors, nurses in that category. We often look externally to the causes of the problem, and yes, that's true. Like the macro, there are macro causes of problems or perpetrators of oppression, but we also, in our role as professionals, perpetuate the same type of oppression, right? Like we can't address those systems here on the macro level until we first understand how we do it ourselves, one-on-one, right, in interactions with our clients. And I think that is something that this play helps people think about and see, is to reflect, hey, yeah, like I don't get a pass just because I'm a social worker, an advocate, or a lawyer, right? Like I'm carrying, there's built-in dominance in me, right? I have internalized white supremacy, and there are ways that comes up in my practice. And here it is, like here's an opportunity for me to see that in this interaction with this therapist and this client, right? And I think like the two go hand in hand. We can't have a full concept of liberation until we understand how do we liberate ourselves first, and then how do we bring that back up to the macro level, right?
And that brings a point that to this day I just don't understand, how we still don't teach cultural hegemony, and how cultural hegemony, Gramsci wrote about it, Fanon wrote about it, is how psychologically society is basically controlled by institutions that basically represent the ruling classes.
Well, I hope this play, Jaime, and this course that you're developing with Ericka and Ovita represents an important step towards dismantling that hegemony through art and works like this. So I know we've run out of time, and so many more things that we could cover. I know that we're going to post a link to the YouTube recording of the play so people can see that for themselves and learn from it. So let me thank you all once again, Ericka Echavarria, Jaime Estades, and Ovita Williams for being on Social Impact Live today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard.
Thank you.
All
Take
right.
care.
Bye, all.
Okay. Next week, we've got Kimberly Jocelyn, a CSSW alumni who's working as a contact tracer here in New York City. And we're going to hear more about that experience next week. So hopefully see you then. Take care. Bye-bye for now.